Hello again, Steve here, and today I wanted to talk about something that Jesse Lee Peterson mentioned not long ago, and it's something that I have to remind myself of fairly regularly because I've heard of it before, which is that we can't really teach anybody anything. He was talking about how he's kind of a spiritual guy. I'm not sure what his spirituality is really, but he was making the point that he doesn't try to teach people about that. He just tries to lead by example, right? And that's an important thing to remind ourselves of. I have to remind myself of that, especially having been a parent and still being a parent, but of now adults, young adults. And a couple of things reminded me of this recently. One of them of which was that I worked at a government school over the last week here doing some renovations on a field house for their football field, and just noticing how micro controlled the kids are, and they're always being taught everything. When they're out in the field, there's this somebody yelling at them, trying to tell them to do this and to do that, and you can see the level of apathy in the kids for that. I mean, they comply because maybe there's consequences, negative consequences that accrue to them, but they're not really doing it because they love it. Now, I noticed that contrasts to when they're just out for recess and it's random play and these people who are always trying to teach them are not around. All of a sudden there's joy in their life, and it's quite a difference actually. And another example of this was recently I did a presentation at an investment conference, and I did quite a bit of effort to prepare what I thought was a very, very important topic. But because I only had a very short period of time, I decided to be to sort of do an information dump, which was a mistake on my part. Once again, I got to be reminded of this. Um, and there was that level of apathy. It was hard for me to keep the enthusiasm of those in the audience up, although I was able to do that to some extent. And a couple of things I think were my observation and the takeaway from just thinking about this. I think that what Peterson is saying is true, but it's true only to an extent. I think it's true to the extent of which where people haven't bought into what it is they were going to teach. So, for example, if somebody is very, very interested, I'll just make up an example here. Say, for example, if you find out where there's a stash of gold in them thar hills, right? There's a lot of gold somewhere, and you're trying to get investment for that, and you're able to make the case to people who are very interested, and you're teaching them, which direction to go, which passes to take, and so on, because they have an interest in what it is that they're going to learn, that you can teach them. They're very much interested. They're asking you questions and stuff like that. But if you look at the two examples that I mentioned there of the kids in that school, none of those kids have agreed. They're put there by their parents, and basically it's Lord of the Flies there. A lot of them don't want to be there. They're figuring out mechanisms that will affect them for years and years to come about how to survive in an environment that they don't want to be. That's basically hostile. There's a lot of bullying and so on going on, both by other kids and the teachers. So, of course, they're not interested in learning. Of course, they can't learn much, except how to survive in it, of course. And the same goes for the group of investors, that this was a conference that was sponsored by their company and they were required to be there. So if they're required to be there, and the information that I got on what to speak about was only from their managers. So in that respect, most of them there hadn't bought in to it. Whereas, had they paid for it themselves and showed up themselves, they would have been much more interested. And I've heard that before too, that people who are given stuff for nothing, or they're expected to show up for something, just like public health care or whatever, they don't have that same internal investment. Whereas people who sign up for an Anthony Robbins event that they've paid thousands of dollars for or whatever, because they've got that investment, because they've reached out, and because they've made a gesture of investment towards that, they're willing to take on what it is that he's going to teach them and embody it and really listen to it and really pay attention and really give feedback and what have you. So I think that's the distinction. I think that Peterson is right in a general sense. If we're going to go around preaching to people just randomly and expecting them to, even no matter how interesting our stuff is, right? If people haven't asked for it and they don't have that buy-in, then they're not going to be interested. So I guess for those who have not bought in and who are not really that interested, we have to use other approaches if we want to. That's why stand-up comedians and whatever have a way of sort of breaking the ice of people who are not interested as a general rule, because they're appealing to something else. They're appealing to our inherent desire to be entertained, right? And through that entertainment, they can move them in a direction. You think of a guy like George Carlin, like he used entertainment to get a political message across. And these things are important. This is forms of rhetoric, essentially, right? It's forms of persuasion that approach the individual where they are. And of course, in that presentation that I thought, I know that the content of it was very, very valuable that I did for the investors. One of the things I talked about first was getting attention, right? Getting attention. And that's what a comedian would do. And that's what a good school teacher does as well. Because within that very, very boring environment, I remember teachers who were entertaining at first. And they allowed input from the students as to how to actually present the class and so on. So it's appealing to those. So we can teach in a way, I think, but we have to do it through forms of like getting attention and figuring out what is the desire of those people and putting that out there and appealing to that constantly, until the point of which, as mentioned in that speech I did, until the point of which, through our messaging, they begin to ask questions. And when people begin to ask questions is when they are teachable. It's when they're receptive to what it is we're going to say. Because I remember even in business, when I was in car sales, if I was reaching out to somebody to say, hey, buy my car, they're very resistant, right? But the moment I got them calling me and asking me about my car, now I was sort of in the driver's seat of somebody who could provide information that would be helpful for them. Until that time, it's not going to happen. So it's something to think about anyways. Hope this is helpful. If you like what I'm doing, please like, subscribe, and share, and comment in the box below. And we'll talk again soon. Bye for now.